I'll be the first to admit, I've gotten pretty cynical about all you normal folks out there. So far, the normals I've encountered have captured gifteds, tortured them, experimented on them, created me to exist as a fucking broodmare, all for their benefit. Interacting with Iris and the Splinter has only made my feelings about normal people worse. But today gave me just a little bit of hope for all you normals out there. I know. Don't tell anyone I'm losing my edge. Still, I want to tell this story, not just because I like talking about the Splinter's defeats, but because I know a lot of you gifted folk out there must be wondering if we can ever coexist with the ungifted. A lot of you must be wondering if it's worth it to even try to prevent the awakening. And so, for those of you looking for just a little bit of faith in humanity, here's the story of how one tiny little village in the Scottish Highlands looked the Splinter in the eye and told him to fuck right off. This is Spines. Shan and I went to Scotland thanks to some of Winry's research, and also because of some tips we'd been receiving from gifted folks and allies all around the world. When the race to put together this new mosaic started, Iris and her people were focused on gifteds here in the United States. They were trying to get their tiles assembled as fast as possible. But with all the interruptions from us and our allies, the Splinter started having to cast their net a little bit wider. We've been hearing about Splinter agents showing up in South Africa, Japan, Costa Rica. And then we got 2 simultaneous high-priority sightings. One in Scotland, the other in Hong Kong. Winry couldn't say for sure which of those 2 was most likely to be the target, so we split up. Me and Shan to Scotland, Winry and Zachary to Hong Kong. One of my tiles had visited Scotland before. I think it was Lexi. I remembered the heavy grey sky, the thick accents of its people, the constant smell of rain. The moment we got out of Edinburgh and into a long stretch of road looping through cow pastures and moors, Shan asked me to pull over. They stepped barefoot onto the grass and let out a long, happy sigh. Like a burden that they'd been carrying for years had been lifted. Their arm vines unfurled and fluttered in the air. Yes, they said. A long, slow word. And even though we were on the clock to get to our destination before the Splinter did, I couldn't make them hurry. I just stood there and watched them walk on the clean earth. And that walk was more like dancing. But after a while, it was time to go. We got back in the car, and we made our way to the tiny little village, whose name I'll never tell. We were spotted the second we arrived. A young woman in tights and a leather jacket leaned against the wall of a grocery store, smoking a cigarette. The second she saw us, her eyes narrowed. She crushed the cigarette under her boot and marched inside. From there, as we parked, as we got out and walked the streets, we saw the news spreading. People walked from pub to bakery, from bakery to house, from house to gas station. No one said hello to us. They just watched through windows and open doors. It feels like they know something, Shan said after a while. They were right, I thought. These people did know something. And that meant our usual strategy wasn't going to work. Whenever possible, I like to be subtle. Slip into a town unnoticed, watch and learn what I can, and involve civilians as little as possible. That usually results in a lower body count. But sometimes, like today, blending into the background just isn't an option. So I decided to take a more direct approach. We walked into the town pub and each ordered a beer. Men leaned on the bar and smoked, even though smoking in pubs has been illegal in Scotland for ages. I guess anyone who was supposed to enforce that law just took one look at these guys and decided it wasn't worth their trouble. They didn't hide the fact that they were watching us. They just took long drags on their cigarettes, blinked, and stared at us so hard I thought they were going to burn holes in our skin. I took a sip of my beer, set it down, and turned to address the pub. "So, gentlemen," I said, "if you don't mind me asking, who do you think we are?" One of them answered with an accent so thick I could barely understand it. But it was something like, "I think you're with them that keep snatching people out of their homes." That's what I thought. I corrected him. "No," I said, "that's not who we are. The people you're thinking of, they're the ones who call themselves the Splinter. We're not with them. In fact, we work against them." "That's what one of them would say if they was trying to gain our trust," said the bartender. I couldn't really argue with that one. I could have used compulsion on all of these guys in quick succession, but that would have felt wrong. It would prove their suspicions right. I was still trying to figure out the best way forward when Shan grabbed my arm and pointed out the window. A blue minivan with rental plates drove slowly past the pub. 2 people sat in the front seats, craning their necks to see the town around them. "Some of your friends, then?" the bartender asked. "Kind of the opposite, I think," I told him. I wondered what we should do. I wanted to follow the van, see what they were up to. But it also seemed smart to stay hidden. So I moved to a seat by the window, tried to ignore the cigarette smoke, and I watched. While I did that, Shan subtly checked out the place. To the other people in the pub, it would have looked like they were just idly tapping their fingers on surfaces. But in fact, they were reading the place's history like Braille. "Splinter hasn't been here," Shan said in a low voice. "But there's been meetings late at night, with all the villagers. I couldn't tell what they were discussing, but it seemed very secretive." The phone behind the bar rang, and the bartender answered. He listened in silence as someone on the other end spoke, too quiet for me to hear. Then the bartender just said, "Aye, will do," hung up the phone, and picked up a shotgun from behind the bar. "Don't either of you move," he said. I froze. I could fix the damage from a shotgun blast, at least if it missed my brain, but at this distance it would shred Shan's flesh too. That wasn't something I was willing to risk. But I also really didn't want to kill a guy who honestly just thought he was protecting someone. And my compulsion works pretty well, but if the guy's trigger finger just happened to twitch at the moment I ordered him to put the gun down, it would all be over. Shan put their hands up and asked in a steady voice, "What's your name?" The bartender blinked. He seemed unsettled by the sound of Shan's voice. "Ian," he said at last. Shan smiled. "Ian, whatever's happened, we're probably the ones best equipped to help you." "Save your breath," Ian said. "We know your friends are going after one of our lads. If they take one of ours, we'll sure as hell take 2 of theirs. 2 at least." "One of your lads," I said. Who? Who are they after, Ian? What can he do?" Ian blushed and seemed to realize he'd given away information we didn't already have. One of the men at the bar leaned toward him, careful to avoid the barrel of the shotgun. "Maybe they're telling the truth," he said. "Maybe they could help us." "Nothing they can do that we can't do ourselves," Ian snapped. Shan shook their head. "That's not true, Ian." Ian seemed to waver at the touch of Shan's voice, and the skin of his neck above his collar turned tomato red. He swallowed and wiped sweat from his forehead. I suspected that Shan was pumping some pheromones into the atmosphere, in addition to doing their usual thing. "Ian," Shan went on, obviously seeing that they had him, "if you just lift the shotgun, my partner can provide a demonstration of the kind of thing we can do for you." The phone rang again. Ian answered it, cradling the receiver between his chin and his shoulder. "Fuck," he whispered at whatever he heard. "Okay," he said after he hung up. "Show me what you think you can do to help." I turned to Ian's friend at the bar and compelled him to turn a complete circle, whistle Camptown Races, and slap himself across the face in that order. He did it. "See, Ian," Shan said, "Wren could have ordered you to put that shotgun in your mouth the second you pointed it at us. But neither of us wants innocent people to get hurt. We won't be taking anyone with us when we leave your village. I promise you that." Ian wavered. Then he let out a curse and put the shotgun down. "Get Agnes on the phone," he told one of his customers. "Tell her we might have some reinforcements here." He took us outside and led us through the town, down narrow alleys, passages between the houses, keeping us out of sight of the main road. "We've got people trying to put them off the scent," Ian told us. "But if they find out where he's hidden, well, we might have to make a stand there." The sound of splintering wood stopped us in our tracks. Ian peeked around a corner, then came back and told us that armed men had started kicking in doors. "Who are they looking for?" I asked. He wouldn't answer. All he said was, "You'll see." We ended up at a small house that looked like all of the others. Ian knocked quietly on the back door and said, "It's me." It opened, and a middle-aged woman holding a gun waved us inside. Half the town was there, crammed into the house's little living room. Most were armed. In the middle of it all sat an old woman, a halo of white frizz standing up from her head. She looked me right in the eye and said, "If you've come to take one of our lads, you had better be ready to kill each and every one of us on your way there." "That's right," said a teenage girl standing next to her. She was terrified, trembling almost too much to hold the shotgun in her hands. But she glared at me and she chambered around. I told them the truth. I told them that we weren't here to take anybody. That we were gifted. That we were the kind of person the Splinter hunted. Even though that one was actually a little bit more of a fib. I didn't think it was the right time to explain the existence of mosaics. Even so, Ian nodded and told them that I was telling the truth. That I could do things that might come in handy. Agnes stared at me and Shan for an uncomfortably long time. Finally, she seemed to make a decision. She nodded. Right then. She rose from her chair, tottering and reaching for a cane leaning against the table. "Let's show them what these splinter cunts are after." She led Shan and I down to the basement. "It's all right, Gareth," she said. "They're here to help." Sitting on a bed in the basement was a young man, maybe 20 years old. He stared at us with wide, fearful eyes and wrapped his arms around his middle. His belly swelled against his shirt. A young woman sat next to him. She stood and balled her hands into fists like she was ready to fight us. I blinked, not sure what to think. Maybe he was trans, I thought. A pregnant trans man. But that wouldn't explain why the Splinter was interested. But I was wrong. "It happens to about 1 in 4 of our lads," Agnes said. "They've got no womb, they've got no women's parts. Still, about 1 in 4, when they're about our Gareth's age, they birth a child." Ian followed us down the stairs. My wife and I have 3 kids. I birthed one of them, he said. May I? Shan asked, and moved close to Gareth. He nodded, and Shan ran their hands over his belly. Fascinating, they said. She's right. There's no uterus, no ovaries, no birth canal, but there is a baby in there. This is how it's always been here, Ian said. Hundreds of years, thousands maybe. As long as there's been records, there's been birthing fathers in this village. Old legend says it comes from drinking the water in our Loch, but I don't know anything about that. It all fell into place, why the splinter would take such an interest here. Most gifted occurrences are isolated, random genetic mutations. They surface seemingly out of nowhere. This was different. This was a genetically isolated population. A village full of people carrying a gifted mutation. A mutation that would change everything we thought we knew about human reproduction. The implications sank in. Shan seemed to realize it at the same moment. Their eyes widened. What? Agnes asked. They don't need Gareth, I explained. If this is common for the men in your village, then they just need one of them. It doesn't have to be one who's pregnant right now. Are any of the men in your town alone right now? Ian cursed and pelted up the stairs. Get to McConnell's, Agnes shouted after him. Shan and I followed, and we were soon joined by 6 very heavily armed people. We rounded a corner onto one of those windy little roads. Sure enough, we found 2 splinter agents trying to push a young man into their van. A shot cracked through the air, and one of the van's tires deflated. I saw Ian holding a shotgun to his shoulder. One of them grabbed the young man, wrapped an arm around his neck, and pressed a pistol to his head. Don't come any closer, he shouted. The agent's eyes met mine. Wren, you take another step and this kid's dead. You can slow time, but not enough to get to me first. He cocked his head so I could see the noise-canceling earbuds he was wearing. And don't try that compulsion shit either. He was right, damn it. I eyed the distance between us, and I knew I couldn't cross it in time. Not if the guy was well-trained. Can you nail him with your spines? I asked Shan under my breath. They shook their head. Not without risking hitting the boy. My aim's not that good. Everyone stayed like that, frozen, for what felt like forever. Really, it was probably only a minute or so. But then Agnes hobbled down the street. She was tiny, frail, barely able to stay upright even with her cane. But her eyes were fire, steel, pure strength. You let that lad go, she said. One of them tried to reason with her. We're not going to hurt him, ma'am. We're working to ensure the safety of the public, to make sure that... Agnes cut him off. Oh, shut your stupid face, she said. We've protected our own for hundreds of years. We're not about to stop now. Now, you either hand over that boy, or you'll have to kill each and every one of us to get away from here. She pointed at the collapsed tire at the front of the van. If you start walking out now, alone, we'll give you a 10-minute head start before we follow. This is the best deal you're gonna get, I added. Even if you kill every person in this village, you won't get me and Shan before we get you. Everything froze again, but this time we all felt who had the power. We knew which way this was gonna go. The moment broke, and the splinter agent shoved the frightened boy away from him. The 2 agents backed away, slowly, all while the people of the village watched them with contempt. In the end, they both turned away and ran down the road, out of sight. Ian lowered his shotgun. Well, they're gone now, but they're sure to bring more. Should we scatter? Shan and I looked at each other. How long can you survive in this town? I asked, cut off from the world. Months, Agnes said, if not years. We've always stored food and water and prepared for the worst. It wouldn't be the first time we've been under siege. I told Agnes we might have a solution. She listened to what we had to offer, and then she turned to her people and asked for a vote. A forest of hands shot up into the air. We said goodbye to everyone in the village. We wished Gareth and his girlfriend good luck. We told Agnes to keep taking care of her people. And then Shan walked in a slow circle, all around the perimeter of the fields and the lakes and the moors surrounding the village. It took an entire day, hours of walking. I kept them company, made sure they paused to rest and drink water, but it was their task. They walked a complete circle around the village, and as they walked, they dropped a special mix of seeds from their palms. The plants had already started to grow as we walked, were already forming a thick tangle of bramble and thorns in a ring around the place. But it wasn't the thorns that made these plants important. No, it was the pollen they gave off, a perfume stronger than the poppy fields in The Wizard of Oz. The people in the village wouldn't feel a thing. Shan made sure of that. But anyone else? Any outsiders approaching? They would collapse into a stupor the second they got too close. By the time Shan and I drove away from that village by the loch, the entire place was hidden in tangled brush like a hedge maze. It would take a tank to get through there, a bomb. Maybe the Splinter would go to those lengths, but I don't think so. They'll be too scared of the other little traps Shan left behind, the stronger poisons dripping from some of the thorns. Thing is, though, this place didn't really need us. We gave them an extra layer of security, a last line of defense. But they saved their own today. They stood toe-to-toe with the Splinter, and they didn't blink. That's what you're up against, Iris. Not terrifying superpowers and mutant abilities. No, it's the little old ladies, the people who fight for their children, the ones who close ranks around the ones they love. Those people, Iris, those are the ones who will be your downfall. I just hope I'm still around to see it happen. Spines is a production of Zoom Doom Stories. It's narrated by Ren Jones, written by Jamie Killen, website and logos by Benjamin Pond, produced by Jamie Killen and Benjamin Pond. You can support Spines by visiting patreon.com/Spines Podcast and by subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes. Spines is a member of Fate Crafters Studios. Find more great shows at fatecrafters.com. This week we recommend Attention Hellmart Shoppers. Attention Hellmart Shoppers is a supernatural comedy set in a fictional big box superstore, unfortunately situated on top of the buried gates of hell. Join our cast of put-upon retail workers as they battle the forces of darkness to bring you the best customer service minimum wage can provide.